Hey, folks, good evening, and welcome to Phantoms and Monsters Radio, where the veil between the known and the unknown is lifted one story at a time. I welcome you and all our listeners, as well as the first timers in the chat. I hope that you find tonight's subject and reports interesting. Now, the Appalachian Mountains, long veiled in mystery and folklore, have once again delivered a chilling bounty of unexplained encounters. From the deep hollers of Kentucky to the misty ridges of North Georgia and the wilds of western North Carolina, these recent and historical eyewitness reports stitched together a patchwork of terror, primal awe, and ancient whispers. Locals and longtime residents, many deeply rooted in the region for generations, are speaking out about what they've seen, felt, and feared. Among the reports are chilling descriptions of upright wolf-like beings, pale gray humanoids with unnatural cadence and behavior, and massive white-furred creatures resembling a cryptid Sasquatch. In multiple accounts, glowing yellow eyes pierce the darkness, and the sounds of babies crying or guttural human-like screams lure the unsuspecting into dangerous territory. These aren't just isolated tales. Multiple witnesses, sometimes years apart, describe nearly identical experiences, suggesting a persistent, possibly interdimensional presence. One story centers around a family picnic interrupted by a bipedal white-furred creature seen hurling tree limbs in frustration. Another follows a retired teacher who repeatedly encountered a massive black panther accompanied by a kitten, creatures denied by wildlife officials but steeped in native lore. Other reports involve vanishing cattle, strange power draining zones in areas so heavy with dread that seasoned hunters and outdoorsmen refuse to return. These aren't the tales of thrill seeking adventurers or out of towners spooked by backcountry sounds. These are the confessions of rural families, local government officials, hunters, and children who have grown up side by side with the forest. And many of them now believe they've glimpsed a side of Appalachia that's not only ancient, but otherworldly. Now, please support the channel by clicking on the subscribe and like buttons and by sharing our programming. Super chat and super thanks donations are appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below the chat box. Other donation links are also shown in the description. Thanks for your consideration. Your comments are always welcome. Tell me or the moderators which accounts you found interesting in the presentation or suggestions for upcoming shows. I want to thank everyone associated with the channel. Now, if you're in the chat and have a question, please use all caps, and I'll try to get to each one of them after the presentation. And I also want to mention that how about becoming a Phantoms Monsters Radio member? It's only $2.99 a month. Join the Insiders tier to unlock powerful community perks like members only live chats with me, access to exclusive video content, priority responses to your comments, first look at new investigations and case drops, as well as free downloads with more to come. You have perk suggestions? We're listening. Phantoms of Monsters is built by the community for the community. Just click the join button on the channel homepage to become a Phantoms of Monsters insider today. Now, the first account. The witness states, these two incidents occurred nearly a decade apart, and for obvious reasons, I cannot guarantee they are related. However, it seems reasonable to at least entertain that idea. The first story takes place at my cousin's trailer, a few houses down from mine. We live in a rural town at the foot of the Appalachian Mountains in southwest Virginia, surrounded by plenty of forest. One night we were playing hide and seek, and everything was going well until I tagged my cousin, making him the seeker. He hated seeking, so instead of playing the game, he decided to quit and sit on the front porch. It was around midnight, maybe a bit earlier, and naturally it was pitch black outside, perfect for scaring someone. My cousin's friend, my brother, and I devised a plan to get revenge on my cousin for being a sore loser. We decided to lure him to the edge of the forest where my brother would jump out at him. A very simple plan for a couple of dumb 13-year-olds, but we were determined. We managed to convince my cousin that noises were coming from the woods, so he reluctantly joined us in the investigation. Joined us to investigate. As we walked along the edge of the forest, I noticed something moving inside, and my cousin's friend and I exchanged grins, thinking it was my brother. Then, out of nowhere, my brother burst from the side of my cousin's trailer, screaming and roaring, sending us all in a panic. He got us so good that we completely forgot about the noise coming from the forest, which could no longer be attributed to him. As we were laughing about the scare, we suddenly heard a horrifying noise coming from the depths of the forest behind us. It sounded like a man screaming for help. The pitch gradually changed, and to this day, I swear it said help. After about 5 seconds of those human-like screams, it transformed into the most guttural roar I've ever heard. It was chilling. We ran inside, and my cousin opened the blinds to the window. It was then that we noticed the haunting sight of a full moon shining above us. Yes, we couldn't figure out what could have made that noise. Now, there are farms around. It could have been a cow being attacked by coyotes or something else typical of rural America. But I've never heard anything like this before or since. Now, jump forward about 9 years to 2013. One late night while driving home from work, I spotted two bright orange eyes peering at me from the side of the dark road. I thought it might have been a fox or a dog, but as I got closer, I realized it was no average fox or dog. It was a massive wolf-like creature. This animal was so tall on all fours that it seemed almost as tall as my car. Its back legs were long and muscular, almost kangaroo-like, while the front legs were short and thin. It dashed across the road in front of my car, jumping the fence to the left of the road with incredible ease. When I got home, I casually told my family that I had finally seen the werewolf that made that noise so many years ago. I don't necessarily believe that it's an actual werewolf, but I can't honestly say that it isn't. Anyway, I thought you might enjoy these strange stories, keeping a keen eye out on the full moon nights. Now, this next account, the witness states, this was back in the days when cars are a luxury few could afford in the Appalachian region of North Georgia. My great-grandfather's friend was relatively well off by the standards of the time and owned a horse. One hot summer day, we decided to ride his horse along the lonely stretch of state highway that cut through the countryside. The road divided an old farm property in half. On the left side stood a barn, and on the right side was an old farmhouse that had been abandoned for several years. Surrounding the property were tall, swaying cornfields. As he approached the farmhouse, he suddenly felt an eerie sense of unease, but didn't think much of it until he heard a baby crying from inside the house. There was no car in the driveway, no open door, no lights on. He wondered if the crying baby indicated that someone, a young mother on the run, or perhaps a kidnapper, was hiding inside. Concerned, he rode his horse up to the driveway, tied it off, and walked up the walkway toward the front door. He was halfway to the house when the crying abruptly stopped. He paused, and just as he did, the sound started again, but this time it was coming from the barn. Assuming it was just the wind, he retraced his steps and headed back across the highway, leaving his horse behind as he made his way through the corn toward the barn. As he was about halfway there, he glanced up and saw nothing unusual inside, but just then the crying stopped again. Moments later, it resumed, this time coming from the house. In a sudden burst of fear, he rushed back through the corn to his horse. He was acting agitated, neighing and stomping, which was unlike the gentle older horse. My great-grandfather's friend later told my grandfather that it was the only time in the horse's life that he had to spur it to gallop away, and it did so without any further coaxing. Now, this next account, the witness states, when I was in seventh grade in eastern Tennessee, I was outside with my dog, lying on a dirt mound and watching the clouds to pass the time. It was around 5:30 p.m. when my dog started barking and pulling at her leash. We lived in the countryside surrounded by woods on one side of our house. I tried to calm my beagle, but she kept insisting. I stood up and looked in the direction she was focused on and said, "Look, there isn't anything there." As I spoke, a large black creature with a canid body sprinted out of the woods. The creature had thin fur that was so black it appeared to have pearlescent hue to it, with almost a purple tint. Its eyes were mid-shade of yellow. The creature's legs were crooked backward, and its hands were long and slender. It stood about 7 feet tall on its hind legs. Then it dropped to all fours. Its back had an aggressive hunch, yet it moved with fluid grace. Every step seemed pre-calculated. As it sprinted, it tilted its head toward me as if aware of my presence, but indifferent to it. Then, without much effort, it jumped over a 4-foot cattle fence. Now, as a senior in high school, I had another experience just last summer. I was working with my father in his shed, where he worked on motors and various projects. I had left my phone inside, and since my friend was staying the night, we headed back down to the shed to retrieve it. It was around 10 p.m., pitch black, and the same time of year as my previous encounter. While standing outside the front of the shed, trying to fit the key into the keyhole, we heard a rustling sound coming from the brush in the woods. It was faint, resembling the sound of a breeze moving through the leaves. Both my friend and I heard it, so we turned our flashlights toward the bush, only to see a pitch black shape standing among the light foliage. The yellow eyes haunt me every time I recall that moment. My friend said, "You see that, right?" At that point, I had already started sprinting towards the house. Seeing that creature and realizing it was just watching us completely shattered my composure. It was so silent, I had a mental breakdown as soon as I stepped inside the house. I've never reacted so intensely to anything before. From then on, every time I went into the woods, I felt as if something was watching me. I know this sounds crazy, and I understand if people don't believe me. It's been difficult to share this experience, and this is the first time I've ever tried to reach out in search of similar encounters. Now, not too long ago, I received a telephone call from TW, who was a retired teacher and well-credentialed local government employee who had also involved in social work in Caldwell County, North Carolina. Now, TW had been a reader of Phantoms and Monsters for some time and watched my video presentations, so he felt comfortable reaching out to me about his encounters. Beginning in the spring of 2004, TW sensed that something was watching him when he took his pit bull outside to do its business during the early morning. His dog was watching or acting nervous and waking TW, so he obliged and accompanied the dog outdoors. Living in the foothills of western North Carolina mountains, there's natural predators that inhabit the area, and he was always armed with a pistol. So one particular early morning, while walking along his driveway with his dog, he noticed what he initially thought was a black plastic trash bag at the end of the driveway. Now, TW found this unusual because none of his neighbors lived nearby, and he and his wife maintained a tidy residence. As he approached the object, it began to move, then rise off the driveway, ultimately transforming into a large black panther with bright yellow eyes. A panther kitten accompanied the big cat. At that moment, his dog cowered behind TW. After lifting itself off the driveway, the black panther and the kitten slowly retreated into the brush. On subsequent occasions, TW saw the same black panther and kitten on multiple early mornings between 3 and 4 a.m. Concerned, he contracted the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission to inquire about the cryptid feline and was informed that there are no such species of black panther inhabiting North Carolina. Later, as a social worker, TW learned from a supervisor that multiple caregivers had ceased assisting an older woman living in the nearby mountains. They were alarmed by sightings of large black panthers during their visits. The supervisor asked TW if he would visit the location. So TW recalled that his father had previously mentioned encountering black panthers while hunting. On several occasions, the hunters claimed to have shot at these big cats, insisting that they had hit them, but the creatures showed no effect. Due to the continued sightings in his father's account, TW suspected that these encounters might be related to portal openings or other unknown supernatural phenomena. He noted that multiple indigenous tribes, particularly the Cherokee and O'Hare people, historically inhabited the area and suspected that these creatures might be associated with tribal lore and religion, manifesting as a result of these practices. Before the Black Panther activity, there had been regular instances of loud booms emanating from the foothills and surrounding area, leading TW to wonder if there was a connection. Now, as a faithful Christian, TW decided to take matters in his own hand. He tells me that one early morning, he again observed the Black Panther and kitten. He prayed, rebuked the creature, and asked it to leave his property and not return in the future. And since that night, the Black Panther has not been seen. Now, I informed TW that I would make inquiries about his claims. Many of my ancestors lived in Mitchell County, North Carolina, and I've heard numerous stories of cryptid sightings throughout my life. And the Southern Appalachian people, both indigenous and settlers, have passed down many intriguing tales of encounters with unknown creatures and other supernatural events, which have continued into modern times. If you are interested in researching these tribal peoples and their traditions, you can find resources like Indigenous Peoples of North Carolina website, which is very helpful. I hope the sound's coming in pretty good. I had some issues with the internet earlier, but we'll keep on going here. This next witness states, "Hello. When I was little, my family owned a cabin on a lake in rural Appalachian, Kentucky. It was quite remote at the time, though it had become more heavily developed over the past 10 years. Whenever we visited the cabin, we often went for picnics in a huge field at the edge of the farmer's property. Now, one day we set up our picnic spot at the crest of a very steep hill. At the bottom of the hill, the field met the tree line of a large forest. Now, I was too young to remember everything that happened, but this is what my sister and parents told me. Now, while we were sitting in the field eating, my dad heard a loud banging come from the bottom of the hill where the trees met the field. He walked to the crest of the hill and saw an enormous white creature standing on 2 feet, taking large logs and throwing them over his head to bang him against tree trunks, creating a loud noise. He showed my mom, and she saw it too. We decided to pack up and leave because they were creeped out by the sight. Now, my parents are very sane and rational people, so they never really talked about it out of fear of sounding insane. No one wants to claim they saw a Bigfoot. So, about 4 years ago, we were having Christmas with my aunt and her family, who also frequented the cabin at the same lake. We started talking about the cabin and sharing memories when my aunt mentioned she had an unbelievable story she had never shared with anyone besides my uncle. She would often go blackberry picking in the fall to make her wild blackberry jam. One day, she thought she saw a bear in the distance eating blackberries, which scared her. However, she continued picking and watching it for a while. Eventually, the creature she thought was a bear stood up, revealing its white coat of hair, and walked away on two legs into the woods. Naturally, we immediately shared our story, and everyone was in awe that we had seen the same thing around the same time in the late 1980s. I decided to do a little research, and it turns out there were numerous sightings of this creature in the late 1980s. Someone was so convinced that what he saw was a Bigfoot that he dedicated the rest of his life to finding it again. If you look it up, you'll find numerous reports of people who saw this creature around the time my family did. Now, I'm not sure I believe that this person found Bigfoot again, but he claims he encountered three of them together, two large brown ones, one with thick white fur, which matches the exact description confirmed independently by my parents and my aunt. I don't know. I don't really know what to think. The irrational part of me knows this probably wasn't a Bigfoot, but I respect my family's sanity and intellect. And everyone was convinced that they what they saw was not a bear. It was covered in thick white fur and walked on two legs. I'm uncertain of how that can be explained away. Now, I recently received an account from a colleague in Frankfort, Kentucky, who investigated an incident involving missing cattle. He forwarded an original email from 2019 that he received from the client. And to this day, there has been no resolution regarding the missing cattle. So the email read, my husband and I live on a family farm of about 100 acres where we raised cattle. My dad grew up here and my grandpa lived and worked this land until the day he died. I know every inch of it and have never felt scared walking the farm or surrounding land. A few months ago, one of our cattle disappeared. She had a calf, and if you're familiar with cattle, you know it's pretty unusual for a cow to leave her calf. Our farm is located in the Appalachian foothills of Kentucky, which has quite a few hollers. We figured the cow must have gone down into the holler and died in the brush somewhere or wandered into a neighbor's field. My husband searched diligently but never found her. No body, no trace, absolutely no evidence of that cow. Now, on the day she went missing, there were also strange spots in the grass of the field where the ground was flattened, almost like something had pressed down on it. Oddly, two vehicles ran out of gas right near those spots. I thought it was just weird, spooky coincidence until today. Today, my favorite cow also went missing. My husband's sister and I spent about 5 hours searching for her. We combed through every inch of the field, searching the hollers and checked the neighbors' fields. There was no sign of her. She also had a calf and was known for being a good mother, so it was perplexing that she was gone while the calf remained there. I initially thought she had wandered into the neighbor's cornfield or possibly been stolen, which seemed strange since she was an older cow and the only one missing. While searching for the missing cow around 6:30 to 7 p.m., my sister and I decided to check a piece of land we don't own. It juts in between our two fields and is mostly wooded, excuse me, bordered by a barbed wire fence. I knew our cows sometimes crossed over, so I just wanted to look there. My sister and I are both in our late 20s and grew up exploring the woods. We hunted, climbed waterfalls, dodged snakes, and pulled ticks off ourselves. At that moment, nothing scared us, or so I thought. I crossed over the barbed wire, but my sister hesitated and stayed back, which was unusual for her. I teased her for being cautious, reminding her I'd been there before and it wouldn't lead her into any danger. Yet she continued to stall, and I eventually got shorter with her and told her to come on. She crossed the fence but kept stopping. When I finally caught up to her, I started feeling uneasy. The only way I can describe it is it felt dark. My sister complained she couldn't hear me, even though I was speaking loudly and was only 2 feet away at most. We finally decided to turn around and quickly leave the area. Once we crossed back over the barbed wire, the bad feeling dissipated. A few hours later, my sister went home feeling unusually tired. I texted her to ask if she thought the woods felt off. She responded saying she was terrified the whole time. Here's a quote from her text. It was like we were going down a dark path to nowhere. I like to explore, but it didn't feel right. It gives me chills and almost makes me cry thinking about it. So I just told myself I was psyching myself out. It was right when we passed the fence, like we were somewhere we shouldn't have been. I was scared. I trust you and everything, but of course, but the feeling I got standing and looking into the woods was telling me not to go, not to cross the fence. The further we went, the worse it got. With the dark shadow of something screaming at my insides, telling me to go back. Afterwards, I had a heavy feeling that made me so tired. Now, This all happened this evening, and we still haven't found the cow or any sign of her. I feel a lingering sense of dread from being in those woods, and I find myself feeling jumpy and exhausted. I was advised to reach out because I believe something supernatural or otherwise is happening. I can honestly say I've never experienced anything like this in my life, and I've never seen my sister so scared, which made me even more uneasy. Now, as I mentioned earlier, after 5 years, there had been no trace of the missing cattle, and the client remains cautious about the wooded area surrounded by the barbed wire fence. Despite extensive research and investigation, no tangible evidence beyond strange feelings reported by the owner and the investigator have ever been discovered. So, this incident took place in the summer of 2003 when I was 13 years old during one of my stays at a YMCA camp in North Georgia near Lakemont. One evening, I was assigned the task of cleaning up the rifle range away from the camp because the counselors hadn't done it due to a thunderstorm. As I was walking up to the range, I heard some rustling, but didn't think much of it since we were in the Blue Ridge Mountains, part of the Appalachians. I walked onto the new range platform and started picking up brass shells I could find. Now, after a few minutes, I continued hearing rustling near a tree trunk. At first, I shrugged it off, and then I noticed that the sound resembled footsteps, not like those of a deer or other normal forest critter. I also heard some odd chattering that I assumed was coming from from a fellow camper. I walked toward the trail leading to the field, realizing the noise was indeed coming from the direction of the tree trunk. Now, as I approached the tree, I saw what appeared to be a pale gray human like being rifling through the underbrush and mumbling in a raspy voice with an odd cadence. I cautiously moved closer and accidentally kicked a pine cone, which made a significant noise as it traveled through the undergrowth. The thing turned to look at me. It had dark, sunken black eyes, thin lips, and a normal looking human nose and patches of hair. What struck me the most was its shocked expression at seeing me. We locked eyes for what felt like an eternity. It then stepped back bipedally about 10 steps, while maintaining eye contact with me, dropped on all fours, and ran into the forest. Naturally, I was terrified and ran back to my cabin to tell my counselors. They all joined me as we walked back to the range to investigate. We found barefoot prints and candy wrappers scattered around, but they dismissed it all as my imagination. Now, this next account, the witness states, this is not a report about a flying craft. Instead, it's a personal account of an experience that happened to me and a coworker on a warm summer night that changed my perspective. We were working the late shift at a restaurant on June 1st, 1997. Now, after our shift ended in the early morning hours, we talked in the parking lot and tossed around a football I had in the car for a while. I was driving him to his house in Madison as we traveled down US 119 near South Charleston, West Virginia. We noticed that there was never any traffic on the road at that hour. Typically, we would stop at the gas station, but to our surprise, the 24-hour gas station was closed. We speculated that the clerk was probably taking a nap. Now, as we continued driving, I suddenly remarked that the car was on the wrong side of the road. Its lights were off and it was parked facing us on the 4-lane road. My coworker mentioned that his dad used to work at a nearby coal mine, and after that, I sort of blacked out. When I came to, I realized our car was going about 10 mile an hour on a 55 mile an hour road. The gas pedal was no longer pressed down. I asked him what had happened, but he couldn't remember what he was saying. I pointed out our low speed and the strange position of the parked car, and he commented that it felt weird and he felt funny. Now, we spent the rest of the drive home talking about something else. Now, when we arrived at his house, I noticed that the sun was starting to rise. I remarked that it wasn't time for sunrise yet. He agreed, and we both assumed the time must have changed. His wife told us that the time changed in the summer and thought it was crazy. Being a young adult living at home, I called my mom to inform her that I'd be late. Somehow we had lost 45 minutes to an hour that night. The next day at work, my coworker refused to talk about it and tried to brush it off as a joke. Now, years later, I ran into him again and asked about that night. He said, "I don't know what happened to us out there, but something did." I can assure you that it was a genuine experience, and we were both afraid to discuss it. Over time, I've forgotten the exact date and times of when we left work and arrived at his house. One thing I know for sure is that the lost hour of my life did happen, and I don't wish to feel that way again. So, folks, if you have any questions or any comments or anything, feel free to comment and let me know. Put it up there, and Kevin will send it over to me. Got anything, folks? Race fan. If you're suffering from lost time and you butt hurts, then you were abducted. I don't necessarily believe all that, but I guess in some cases that may be true. But I have had a lot of lost time uh, reports come into me over the years, and I do truly do believe some of them are abductees. But I think there could be other instances, possibly portals or something happening, or I don't know, maybe a medical thing. Who knows? Let's see. Paranormalism net. Have you seen any reports or photographs of Black Panther type creatures with human like faces? You know, I had a large feline sighting down in Florida. I remember years ago. It was bipedal too, and it had a human face. But other than that, as far as Black Panthers, I don't know. I don't know. Alistair B. Lon, do you still go on ghost investigations? Yeah, if there's a case, it's not too far from me, I'll go. I mean, I've done several cases around here where I live at, even many in Gettysburg over the years. I don't always report them. I mean, most times it's usually just something that's not even paranormal. But occasionally I'll get something. But yeah, I do cases all the time. Abdallah, Is the aliens phenomena related to the Antichrist and the end days? I have no idea. Uh, if anybody has any thoughts on that, put it up there on the chat. But I don't know if it does or not. I personally don't believe it does, but who knows? Let's see. Kurt W75. What your thoughts on a gifting chair for Bigfoot? Lon, I've heard for and against it. I just wanted to see what you thought. Um, I don't have much issue with the gifting, though I have never used it. I mean, I've been on investigations where others have. This investigation I'm involved with Tim, Dave Scott and Tim James out in BC. They are gifting, and something keeps taking and bringing things back, even while they're there. So I don't think it's a Bigfoot, but it may be something else. But I don't, I really don't have much thought about gifting. I have heard people discuss it and talk about it. I know there's several investigators that don't even think about doing it. Um, but I have been a part of teams that have done it. Can Squatch, any reports from hikers or campers on the Appalachian Trail years ago? There were a few murders on there. Yeah, I mean, there have been, I know here in Pennsylvania, there have been at least two of them over the years. People go missing down in Virginia in the George Washington National Forest. There have been some incidents. I know at least one death there and another missing person. It does happen. I don't know what the date was. That one in Pennsylvania was up near Buchanan, up near Harrisburg, where just before it goes across the walkway over across the river across the Susquehanna. But that was many years ago. I'd say to anybody, and Marla, who's in the chat, who's one of the moderators, I think she'd agree. You just watch yourself when you're out there. If anything doesn't seem right, take heed. Don Moore, do you think that one creature was a crawler, raker, maybe the pull off creature, which is 7 to 8 to 11 feet, no hair, and fast like a crawler? It could have been. This whole crawler phenomena is just it's just so strange to me. Even though I wrote about it, I still don't understand it, but we still get reports. Um, I definitely feel they're supernatural. I don't think but I think they're also, you know, corporeal as well. I mean, there is some flesh and blood involved there. I mean, it's a physical being. Are they portal travelers? Possibly. Are they? What are they? We just don't know. Um, but it still confounds me. Paula S. Lon, great stories tonight. Why do you suppose Appalachia has so much activity? It's so congested there with cryptids. um, those mountains, I mean, from Georgia up to Maine, have always had a lot of activity. It's just embedded in the area. I mean, even during the Civil War, there were reports of strange things in those mountains. I had family that lived in those mountains, and they reported a lot of weird things. There were a lot of stories that came out of there. I have no idea. It's just like a lot of other places that are hot spots. Could it be an energy source? Could it be a magnetic or geomagnetic source that is causing this? I don't know. It's possible. I think just like Gettysburg, I think that there's a geomagnetic reason why so much activity is there. So it could be that, but it's just like a lot of other places. The Appalachians and even the Blue Ridge and South Ridge in Pennsylvania, going up into the Laurel Highlands. There are a lot of places. There are a lot of A lot of weird activity, but it usually involves mountains and valleys. Paranormalism net. Has there been any evidence of actual lycanthropy, human transformation into an animal involved in dogmen or werewolf sightings in present day? Well, nothing that can be proven. I mean, there are a lot of theories. Um, I think around here, in particular, here in South Central Pennsylvania, particularly down in Maryland, um, there have been some weird sightings of cryptid canids. In fact, we're working on one now, which happened near Columbia, Maryland. And there have been several sightings of this aggressive cryptid canine. One broke into a house, and another one. And when I get my blog back, I'll write about it. But it it happened near an apartment complex in Columbia, and this woman saw it while she had her dog out, and this creature was white in color. It was about 7 to 8 foot tall, and she backed up and got into her home, back into her apartment, and the thing followed her and tried to get into the door. So, this is something we're looking into. I talked to the witness. Rissa talked to the witness. She's going out there and investigate it as well. So this is going to be something we're going to be looking into a little bit more. And I'm familiar with the area because I used to work near there. So yeah, I know that area pretty well. Sasquatch, any weird cave stories from Appalachia? Yeah. In Southwest Virginia, there have been some sightings in some of the caves of what people would call feral humans, possibly crawler humanoids. There have been a couple of those. But Southwest Virginia, even into the other side into West Virginia, there's a lot of caves. There are a lot of caverns in that area too. So you can almost find anything. I believe in one of those areas. But there have been some sightings of some type of humanoids. Magnus, Lon, are you familiar with the Pennsylvania German folklore of the Hexenwolf? Yes, I am. Thoughts on this and the Dueo and upright canines historically? Well, what happened was, when the Pennsylvania Dutch, for the most part, or the later Germans who had come into Pennsylvania and Lancaster and York County and other areas, they set their farms up, but many of them eventually moved down into Maryland in Frederick, Allegheny County, and some were also in Carroll County and Washington County. But anyway, over the years, there have been these cryptid canine sightings, and the name they gave it was the Dueo, and it's something I've talked about before. We've had several sightings. They're still continuing on. The Hexenwolf, that's another name they give it. But it's traditional. I mean, it's something that, I think a lot of people, when they saw something weird like that, thought back to the old world where, of course, there were a lot of werewolf tales and the Hexenwolf tales and things as that. So, but Frederick County in particular has had a lot of sightings, and it's mostly farmers. And those sightings go back into the late 1800s. Peace. Do you know of a human being saved by a Bigfoot? I've had a couple of accounts of people saying they were saved by Bigfoot. A couple kids who say that Bigfoot saved them when they got lost in the forest. You hear a lot of different tales. Do I believe them? Yeah, I think there's a possibility. Many times these are female Bigfoot, according to the witnesses, or if it's a kid in particular. And I guess that maternal instinct kicks in with them. And but there have been cases over the years. I mean, throughout, in particular, the United States. So yeah, there have been. I had a I had a report given to me from New Mexico near the Texas border where a female Navajo lady had an encounter with she was what happened was she was on an old porch of a house that was behind her residence, and it was an abandoned house, and the porch itself had a lot of loose boards and nails and stuff, and she was walking on there barefoot and ripped her foot up with on a nail or a board, and she was sitting there crying, and this Bigfoot, according to her, reached out, picked her up, and carried her home. Um, and I've heard similar stories in the past as well. So yeah, there's some stories out there. Can't Squatch, any fair little people folklore from the European settlers in Appalachia? Well, the early settlers in Appalachia, particularly in West Virginia and a little bit further down into northern uh, North Carolina, most of those were Scots. There's a lot of Scots that moved in there at the turn of the century, and that's I think well, there was a lot of Germans as well, but there were a lot of Scots. Do I, and you do hear a lot of stories about Fae and little people, and is it something that's indicative of their culture? I guess it probably could, but I have heard the stories. I mean, and in fact, some of the sightings near Point Pleasant in Mason County of the Mothman also included some small humanoid sightings, occasional sightings that people would report as well. So, I mean, is it connected to the Mothman? Is it connected to something else? I don't know, but there have been reports. Alistair B. Lon, any thought on our stories of witch encounters? Yeah, I mean, there've been a lot of witch encounters, particularly around here. I mean, you hear them all the time. My colleague Rissa, she has looked into a lot of that historical wise of the region. Um, Pennsylvania, I don't think you can go too far without tripping over a witch or a witch story. So, but there have been a lot of reports over the years. Anything else, folks? Okay, well, I want to thank each and all of you for watching and chatting. If you donate, it is truly appreciated, and your support's what makes all this possible. So please like, subscribe, and share. If you have a sighting or an encounter report that you'd like to be considered for the personal report show or post it on Phantoms and Monsters, feel free to forward to my email at lonstrickler@phantomsandmonsters.com. Now, before previously I talked about signing up to be a Phantoms and Monsters insider. It's only $2.99 a month. Just go and click the join button on the website. We do a lot of things. I'm putting a lot more into it. I'm going to be offering free downloads to members and a lot of other things. And if you do have any suggestions for perks, let me know about it. So until we meet again, stay healthy and safe. Have a great weekend and have a good night. Talk later.